Lincoln. The first question people always ask me is, am I connected to our martyred president? And the answer is yes. His father Thomas and I are second cousins. Actually, we're half-second cousins. Our great-grandfather was Mordecai Lincoln. Mordecai was married twice, and Thomas and his son Abraham, the president, were descended from his first wife. I'm descended from his second wife. He had two families. I was born around 1806 in Uniontown, Fayette County, Pennsylvania. Grew up there. There I met Margaret Hedden. Margaret Hedden is an ancestor of the Hedden family here in Geneva, from her brother Henry, who came out here. Anyway, I married Margaret in 1845. Later, we moved. Many of our children were born in Uniontown. Then we moved to DeWitt, Iowa. We had 5 children. Daniel Boone Lincoln was our oldest. He had come out to Nebraska first. He was in the Civil War. His picture is upstairs in the courthouse with the GAR display. He and his wife are buried in another lot here in Geneva. Then we had Mary Jane, who married Nicholas Traver. They're buried here by this obelisk. He was killed by lightning as he stood in the barn door one Sunday morning, and they came to look for him to get him for breakfast and found him laying in the doorway dead, killed by lightning. We had John, who later moved to Idaho and homesteaded out there. We had William, who was a woodsman in Arkansas and is buried in Little Rock. And then we had Aletha, who made this trip from DeWitt to Fillmore County with us. She is buried in Shickley. She was married to Benjamin Justice. He outlived her, and after her death, he went back to a lake in Illinois to live with family there and is buried there. Between William and Aletha was our son U.R. He lived here in Geneva all his life. He had problems. If you read in the newspapers, he had a problem where he was picked up for, they called it dipsomania, which is an old term for a word, alcohol. In 1920, he was listed as living in the poor farm here in Geneva. He died later that year, and he's buried here in an unmarked grave. We were living in DeWitt, Iowa, and in 1873 we decided to come out here where our family was. Packed up a wagon, the team. Took us 24 days to make the trip from DeWitt to Fillmore County. Cost us $31.25 in cash along the way, mainly to buy a few groceries and also feed for our animals. Some days we made as many as 20 miles, some days only 7 or 10. Some days it was raining and we didn't go very far. In Des Moines, we had to pay tolls to get across the river. But anyway, we finally arrived out here, tired. We filed for a homestead. Our homestead was in Hamilton Township, Section 4, which is a mile north of Highway 74. Now that land belongs to some of the Shelkoff family. I lived on until 1887 and died and was buried here. Margaret lived to 1895. She was quite a bit younger than me. In her last days, she lived with our daughter Aletha, where she died. Family stories tell that she smoked a corncob pipe. I don't know, that's what the family said. Anyway, she was referred to in her obituary in the paper as Mother Lincoln, which showed that she had a lot of respect in the community. Her death date is not on the stone here. I did put her birth date. There's missing, they don't have all the information on Patterson either. At some point the stone was broken and been fixed, and that's good. And so Aletha's daughter, Pearl, married Frank Crawford. And Frank and Pearl are buried here. They had 2 children, Fern and Harry Sr. Crawford. Harry's buried back in Virginia, but his son Harry Jr. and his wife have a stone ready for them over here. The death date's on out yet. They still live in Kansas City. My connection is to the Heddens. Margaret Hedden's brother was Henry Hedden. He and his wife are buried in Shickley. Their son Theodore is the ancestor of the Hedden family here in town. Their other son, James Hedden, was my great-grandfather. That's my connection to this family. Questions?
Yeah, were the Heddens here already, or did they follow Patterson? And
I think they followed Patterson. Because
1873, that was pretty early.
yes, that was early. And like my great-grandparents were married until the early 1880s, and they were married in
Pleasantville, Iowa.
When you said that he does go back to Lincoln, what was the, you said it was cousins, or how is that go?
Mordecai Lincoln had 2 wives.
Okay.
The first wife would have been the great-grandmother of Thomas Lincoln,
Okay.
the father of the president.
Okay.
The second wife was the great-grandmother of Patterson.
Okay. Cool.
You're back quite a ways as far as cousins.
Yes.
What would you say then for cousin? 6th cousin, 7th cousin, or how was that?
Who?
The Patterson would he
Patterson?
would be a 5th cousin to Abraham Lincoln?
No, let me think.
Or a half?
The great-grandfather. They were, Thomas and Patterson were second cousins because they had the same great-grandfather.
So
So they were second
he would be a
cousins.
2nd cousin to Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln would have been a second cousin once removed.
To Patterson.
Yeah.
Oh.
Which would actually be the second cousin.
What does removed mean?
What does once removed mean? Is a good question.
Good question.
Yeah, some of
Just
us-
Google it later.
Yeah.
Yes. Google it.